and let us all do we can to build a better future.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to introduce our guest. Her name is Tezlyn Figaro. She is an outstanding advocate. She also works with Charlemagne the God. She actually has an outstanding show. She is the host of Straight Shot No Chaser podcast. That's on Charlemagne the God's Black Effect Podcast Network on the largest radio audio platform in America, iHeartRadio. She has also done a lot of advocacy groups. She's also was in 2016. She served as a national racial justice director for Bernie Sanders' campaign, and she's also done numerous other work as well. She's also been on Fox News as well as numerous other media platforms. Tezlyn Figaro, thank you so much for joining us here at Hard Lens Media. We are so grateful to have you on. Is there anything else that I missed? Because please introduce yourself to our viewers and subscribers, because you are our first guest. So if there's anything I missed, please please correct me.
No, thank you so much, Ava. People can always look me up at TezlynFigaro.com. I am a contributor for Black News Channel, so I'm on every day trying to bring the news as honest as I can. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much as well. So let's look at this. In the first two stories that I covered on our show, it's quite clear that the Democrats are walking into slaughter into 2022, and that will be possibly, some have observed, how 2024 will potentially play out. Donald Trump has made these statements here and there that he's going to potentially run again in 2024. I'll be surprised if he doesn't throw his hand in the ring, but no matter how it plays out, the Democrats clearly dropped the ball. And yet, when you are speaking out and when you're being that independent voice, calling out the failures of the Democratic Party, and let's also look at the failures of the Republican Party, what are some of the issues that the Democratic Party has missed and this opportunity that's now lost them? What have they failed on?
Well, I've been talking about the same thing for over the last 10 years plus on radio, television, blog talk radio, AM radio, you name it. I've been pretty consistent in my message. We could do a show, just a show alone, to talk about the Democrat Party's failure. But what is unique to 2020 is the relationship that Joe Biden had, particularly with the African-American community. You know, I make no mistake about it. As I mentioned, I'm a contributor for a Black News Channel. So a lot of my perspective is from the lens, as just like your hard lens, from the lens of Black voters. And Black voters had a different relationship with Joe Biden because of his relationship with Barack Obama and because of that long history. And so when you looked at 2020, and how the need to get Trump out because of the fascism or, you know, the white supremacy and all of the glaring, polarizing things that were happening, a lot of folks, at least in the Black community, chose Joe Biden as an alternative, as a lesser of the two evils. But the issue has become with this particular presidency is because Joe Biden made it personal. He promised things from a personal standpoint. He literally said, the only president that has ever said, quote, in unquote, Black people, I owe you. So it left a different, it hit different, as they say. It hit differently with how people felt, what they expected in return. I tell people all the time, all politicians, you know, make promises they can't deliver on. Our job is not to promote them. Our job is not to be fans. Our job is to continue to what I call push the line. When they give us things, we should add more pressure to ask for more. It should never be enough. But the way this unfolded with literally volunteering promises made to the African-American community, it pretty much put on blast what folks like me have been talking about for the last decade plus, as far as 90% of Black people vote for the Democrat Party. And many people feel they have not gotten anything in return. Not that some things have not been done. By default, sure, some things have been done. But when you tell one particular community, I owe you, and when Jim Clyburn says, I know Joe and Joe knows us, and Joe, you know, he's the best friend of Black America, it leaves a different relationship that has yet to be addressed. And so when you saw that commentary on Fox News, it was coming from the frustration of seeing it through that lens, but also what I've been talking about from this party all the way, you know, for the last 10 years on their failure to support candidates on the local level, their failure to invest in candidates on the local level, their failure to invest to get people out of office, but not invest to get people in office. So again, it's a wide variety, but that particular segment, and thank you so much for sharing it, was just my frustration of what I wasn't seeing in the mainstream media with wanting to put everything on Joe Manchin instead of spreading the love between both the Joes.
Right. And so here's the thing. During the 2020 primary, as well as the general election cycle, we hear Hardlands Media and numerous other channels like the Mikasu Casa Network, Convo Couch, Jimmy Dore, and so many other commentators. I'm going to miss them all, but there's a lot of people who are calling out the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, and they're nominating Joe Biden, and there's huge support for Joe Biden, when in fact he has such a troubled and checkered past, especially being on the wrong side of a lot of issues. And it's quite clear that, when corporate media was covering the primary and the general election, there was a fact that they were ignoring Biden's statements, especially about being against desegregation, being against busing, saying that he didn't want his white children with black children, and he's never apologized for the crime bill. And the thing is, it was refreshing to see you on Fox News and almost cause your two fellow colleagues on that Fox News segment to be silent, because I don't think a lot of people seem to remember or even acknowledge the fact that Joe Biden has this checkered past. So the thing is, we need to talk about some of these politicians. A lot of them have been in office for a very long time, decades, perhaps longer than should be. And yet there seems to be a fact that we want to gloss over and only cover some of the things that maybe people want to hear. But what is the real truth about Biden, and what are his failures in regards towards actually following through with his promises? Because so far as it stands right now, Biden had the audacity to say to Charlemagne that if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And then when Charlemagne also asked, well, who's in charge of the country? Is it Joe Biden or Joe Manchin? When it's quite clear, Manchin has been dictating all the policies throughout this first year. So what is the failure of Biden, and why is it the fact that no one has really acknowledged the fact that Biden has this really troubled past? And you seem the only person right now, as well as numerous other people, at least independent media-wise, to speak out against it and actually call it.
Well, I think there's a hesitation for folks to call it out, because then they would have to justify why they supported Joe Biden in the first place. Some people do it well to say, hey, this was the better option to Trump, and this was all we had, and we had to vote for someone. And then there's folks like me that did not push any particular politician. I am always in the business of adding pressure, what I call push the line politics until something happens. So I'm comfortable with saying on mainstream media, independent media, on my telephone, text message, you name it, that there are many issues that we still need to pay attention to, so that next time we're not repeating the same thing over and over. So I think a lot of it is, some folks are embarrassed, to be quite honest with you, to have to justify the fact that Joe Biden flat out told leaders at the beginning of this year on the leaked tapes that I remind people about all the time, flat out said that I will not be moving forward with any executive orders, basically told black leaders to go to hell. A lot of people are embarrassed by that, because what it does is it takes away their power, if you will, that they pretend to have in the community. And to be quite honest with you, it bruises their ego. And it's unfortunate that a lot of this, on how these stories are covered, how leaders talk about this, is more so about their ego and the power that they want to have over the people's voice, instead of removing ego out the way and dealing with it for what it is. This cycle cannot continue to be repeated year over year over year. To keep ignoring what voters are saying. And I always make this clarity because I'm always about teaching people political education. When we talk about young voters, we're talking about 18 to 45. I know 45-year-olds, 42-year-olds, 40-year-olds that have grandchildren. So we're talking about 3 generations, the parents, their children, and their children's children. And so when these issues are completely ignored, and folks are just saying, oh, you don't get it, you just don't understand, maybe you're looking at it the wrong way, when we're literally telling you what our generation, 18 to 45, is suffering with, is talking about at the kitchen table, and is glossed over as a what they call low information voter, quote and unquote, is disrespectful to just completely ignore the pains from the people and from the ground. So I just try to be authentic to myself. I've been talking about the same thing in politics for a long time. I've offended folks. Some folks have liked what I say. I have challenged Bernie Sanders. I've challenged Joe Biden. I've challenged President Trump. None of them are above being challenged. Our job is to provide the pressure, not the applause. And so if we are not doing that on the ground and continuing to yell and speak up, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves, our children, and our children's children.
Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, there's something else that I want to bring up too. And you actually tweeted out a segment of a recent show that you were on, and there was in the tweet you put in the message, when politicians volunteer lies, it causes voter depression. It's the lie for me. So the thing is, can you explain that to our viewers? Because in the video you explain, and you counter when your fellow colleague was saying, well, politicians make promises all the time. What is this voter depression? Because as we walk into 2022, I said this on the show, that there's a good chance that there's going to be a low voter turnout for this midterm election cycle, especially during the primary, when it's going to matter who's going to stand up against the incumbent or who's going to make it to the general election. Can you explain it to our viewers?
Absolutely. Allow me to use, I love analogies, so I'm going to use an analogy. So imagine if I said, hey, it's going to be Thanksgiving dinner, kid, come on over. I got yams, sweet potatoes, dressing.
Oh, okay.
The turkey, the ham, it's all going down. You didn't
love it.
You didn't call and ask, hey, are you cooking Thanksgiving dinner? I just voluntarily called and said, hey, you know what, kid, I feel like cooking Thanksgiving dinner. And then Thanksgiving comes. And then you show up at the house. You come inside the house. You can't smell anything. You can't see any food. There's nothing nowhere around. And then you say, well, Tez, what's going on? I thought you had food. Hey, well, just give me more time. What the hell are you talking about? Why would I volunteer a lie? See, there's one thing to lie, and there's another thing to volunteer a lie. Why would I volunteer a lie and say, come to my house for Thanksgiving? I have all the fixings set up for you. And then you get here and there's nothing at all. And then I tell you, hey, give me more time. I didn't have time to go to the grocery store. Do you think it would have been nice or courteous of me to call you ahead and say, you know what, kid? I don't have it. I didn't have the money. I wasn't able to go to the store. Save your gas. Save your time. Don't come over knowing damn well I don't have the food prepared. This is what has happened. Joe Biden volunteered a lie. No one asked him to promise the George Floyd family about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I was in the room with the family, literally. I'm not talking from the sideline. I was in the room. When Joe Biden contacted this family, nobody in the room said, hey, you know what? We'd like to see change by the anniversary of his death. He made that promise. No one asked for student loan debt. Nobody was saying, hey, Joe Biden, say you're going to do this. He had every opportunity to say, I'm not for canceling student debt loan. There were over 20 people running for office. Not all of them were in agreement with canceling student debt loan. He made that promise. So when people come to me and say, well, you just don't want to pay your bills. What the hell are you talking about? I never asked for you to pay my bills. You volunteered a lie, told me to come over Thanksgiving dinner. I came to Thanksgiving dinner. There was nothing at all. You didn't tell me to go back home, maybe pick up a burger, maybe do something else. I came looking for it. And the reason why I use that analogy, kid, is because I did a speech earlier this year at Pam Turner's Pam Turner. We were organizing for her, a lady who was murdered by the hands of police in Houston, Texas. And at that time, Jim Clyburn was talking about, it's better to get half a loaf of the bread than no bread at all. And I did a speech then that said, we want all of the loaf. We have to demand all of the loaf. But guess what happened? Right now, we didn't get half the loaf, not all the loaf, not even the damn crumbs. So it is a failure on my part to not bring that up. I did a poem in 2014 before Trump was running, when I said you gave us crumbs and when you were finally at the table, you came, you ate. This was the same where the brothers turned on each other. This is the same thing that I've been talking about for years. So when people come and they say, oh, wow, you're helping Trump. Folks have lied on me. You're helping Trump. I've never supported Trump. I've never supported Republican. I've never supported any of the ideology. I've been talking about the same damn thing I've been talking about since the beginning of time. I go to Fox News, in case people want to know, is because that is exactly where my opposition is. And I've always been one to go where the opposition is. Anybody can go on a liberal station and preach to the choir and, oh, yeah, girl, you tell them. Yes, girl, tell them. And then it's something different to go to the opposition and go to the same place where I know people don't want to hear what I have to say. I went to Fox last week because Joe Manchin went to Fox last week and made the announcement that he was kicking us in the teeth. So somebody needed to go to Fox News and tell Joe Manchin, I'm here on your turf and I'm going to kick you in the teeth, using the analogy, the same way that we have been done. And so we are not moving with that type of boldness and tenacity and still getting the consequences that come with that, because I get death threats, I get all types of email, you name it, I get it. I call it the consequences of consciousness. If nobody is willing to stand for that, then what the hell are we doing? I am about the least of these. Matthew 25. When I was hungry, you fed me. Going back to the food analogy, I expect people to be fed. I expect the manna to be turned into bread. I expect the least of these to get water when they're thirsty. And so if we don't challenge those things, then what the hell are we doing?
There's another thing too that you brought up in that interview in Fox, and that is you said more or less, and I apologize if I misquote you, but you did state that no one should be cheering the fact that Joe Manchin were to go to the Republican Party, he's still going to screw you over. Because when we said on the show, the same people who donate to the Republican establishment also donate to the Democratic establishment. Can you explain that to our viewers exactly why, especially when we walk into the midterms, there is talk about how the Democrats are going to lose control of the House and we're looking at this red wave? What's going to really change for working class citizens, and why should both Democratic voters, Republican voters should realize that they're being screwed over by a two-party system that only caters to their number one constituents, and that is Wall Street executives, big banks, and major corporations?
Absolutely. And you know, this coward mentality of, oh, we can't say anything. If we say something, the Republicans are going to take over. Well, guess what? If you actually do what you say you're going to do, you don't have to worry about the Republicans taking over. What about that for a concept? If anybody ever thought about that? Let's actually do what we say we're going to do, and then you'll maintain control. That's a simple concept. So one has to wonder that if you don't want to do what you say you're going to do, then apparently you don't want control. Is that because you're already in control, which means that it's two wings of the same bird? Does it mean that regardless of who is in power, that you still intend on screwing over the people? The math is not mathing. You cannot continue to tell people, hey, put me in power. And then once you get in power, say, well, I can't use my power because I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my power. Well, what the hell is it about putting you in power? And I say, call people's bluff. What is this fear? You know, I love analogies. Use this fear. If a man tells me, well, I'm going to leave you and I'm going to go to the other woman. Well, guess what? Go see if the grass is green on the other side. I'm going to call you on your bluff. Go see. Go see. Because I'm not winning by you staying here. There's nothing that I'm gaining by you staying here other than being abused, mistreated, left behind with not even $2. This Democrat Party doesn't leave $2 on the nightstand. I talk about it even in the same poem that I talk about called Blackout 2016. And I said, we're tired of feeling like the mistress. No more sideline. I'm going to take mine. Get out the way or get in line. This is where we are. And these voices have come from the groundswell. It's been happening for years. I've been screaming it. You've been screaming it. People have been screaming it. And what I believe is what's happening now is the voices that have been yelling and yelling and yelling from the bottom are now all coming to the top and saying something about this is not making sense. And shame on anybody to demonize anybody that is asking this government a question, which is, what have you done for me lately? And that goes across the board. None of these politicians are angels. None of them are above it all. It's our job to continue to push the line. People say, well, who is the right candidate to get behind? Nobody. That's the answer. Stand on our own 2 feet. Demand something from all of them. And when they do it, hell no, it's not enough. Demand and get more. That's how this game is supposed to be played, folks. You keep asking for more and more. It's never enough. It's not a marriage. It's not a, hey, you're demanding too much of me. No, it is continue to court me throughout the process if you want me to stay being your woman.
That's outstanding. So then I have a follow-up to this, because recently Representative Pramila Jayapal did an op-ed, and basically she gave a warning to the Democrats saying that we're walking into a political disaster. But yet it needs to be very clear here that the Congressional Progressive Caucus, its leader is Representative Pramila Jayapal, who constantly compromised with Manchin, and that $7 trillion Build Back Better went to $1.75 trillion, and now it's going to be non-existent at this point. And in 2018, there was this huge movement to try and reform the Democratic Party. So, two-part question. Can the Democratic Party ever truly be reformed to be a working class party? Yes or no? And please give a full answer if you can. And then second part is this now the time to where we actually talk about looking at third parties, independent parties, and breaking away from both the Democratic and Republican parties? Is this midterm the year where we could see that happen, potentially?
Well, one thing I've always promoted is to protect, especially depending on the state that you live in, I've always promoted being independent, or at least if nothing else, can you pretend like you're independent? Do you have to continue to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm ready to vote for you no matter what? I'm ready to vote blue no matter what? You know, I talk about all the time that even in a and I use these analogies again to make it really simple to people. Even if I know that I'm going to kind of, you know, end up being with the guy, is there not a chance, you know, should I not at least pretend, you know, that I'm not just so willing to give everything? Should I not at least make him court and act like he wants me to be his girl? We have moved past that, where now it's just, hey, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to line up with whatever it is that you say. And so if fear is always the greatest the greatest thing to get people to move, the greatest motivation. If there's no fear to lose anybody as a voter, if there's no fear to lose a seat, then nothing changes. I believe that folks should run for office, even if they think they don't have a chance in hell. Run. I don't believe that that's splitting the ticket or splitting the vote. I believe that you're saying, hey, I'm willing to challenge you and challenge what it is that you're saying until you do right by my community. I don't think it's anything wrong with that. Should there be strategy involved? Absolutely, yes. Some states have closed primaries. Some states do not. But what we cannot do is continue just to be totally silent. And speaking on the progressive side of things, I honestly, kid, do not believe that when you talk about over 300 plus people in Congress, in the House of Representatives and the Senate, do you expect me to believe that Joe Manchin is the only one that is pushing this agenda? I just don't believe that. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just reality. I believe that he is the fall guy for a lot of folks, probably Joe Biden included, that is too afraid to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do the Build Back Better. I want to be able to say, hey, we're not going to spend that much money. I'm a moderate Democrat. It is what it is. And that's just that, because of their fear of progressives. One thing I can't stand is coward behavior. I was a military police officer in the military. I can't stand coward. You know, if you're going to die on the sword, die on it. Die on it like a man. Die on it like a woman. Stand for what you believe in. And there are more moderates than there are progressives. I don't believe that every progressive that says they're progressive is a progressive. You know, so I encourage progressives to challenge some of these folks that you guys say that are your progressive leaders that you're donating all of your money to. Progressive leaders, elected officials spend a lot of time talking about, oh, they're donors. Oh, they're taking money from the poor. But what about these progressive leaders that are taking money from the poor, literally, not a corporation? But somebody is mailing in their last $2, giving it to this progressive leader that had no intention of standing on progressive policies. To me, they're the worst of the worst. Who takes from the poor and then lies and then has every intention to flip or bend the knee? So I tell progressives, challenge the people that you guys say are progressives. What are they doing? What the hell have they done? It's only 6 people that voted against infrastructure. You mean to tell me out of 350 people, only 6 people have the nuts to come to the microphone and say, I am against this? Something about this is not adding up. Who is hiding behind Joe Manchin? And what promise did Joe Manchin get for pushing this line? Is it a committee position down the road? Is it money that will be donated to his campaign? And why is the DNC not raising money to put him out of office? They sure as hell raise money to put him in. So why are they not raising money to put him out? Those are the things that people need to be asking to say that the math is not math. And where's Andrew Yang? He's all about math. Who's going to call out and add this up and try to figure out why this math does not make sense?
Absolutely. And there's another thing I want to bring up too, and this is rewinding back the clocks towards the final debate between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, where Biden said straight to the camera to everyone in Washington, D.C. that nothing would fundamentally change. And in that, we're still seeing the Biden-Harris administration still implement a lot of Donald Trump's border policies. The kids are still in cages. We're still seeing police brutality go unchecked. And even now recently, Joe Biden went on to state that there's not going to be any kind of federal solution to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. He went on to state this. There is no federal solution. This gets solved at the state level, meaning he's putting it all in the states. I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm not going to shut down the economy. I'm going to shut down the virus. And then he also goes on to state anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as president of United States, and this is a quote from the debate that he had with Trump, that anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain president of the United States. And yet this pandemic is still going on. It's impacting a lot of people, and it's still an ongoing thing. So nothing has fundamentally changed. What do we do going forward, knowing the fact that we got these politicians who clearly have no imagination whatsoever and are frankly abandoning us? We're not getting UBI. We're not getting Federal Jobs Guarantee Act. We're not getting Medicare for all, student debt forgiveness, medical debt forgiveness. We're still doing regime change wars. Climate change is still the ever-growing threat to humanity. What can we do going forward? And especially, how can we end this voter fatigue to where people are just tired of supporting these politicians who make this promise and we get nothing returned back?
Yeah. Well, to quote my brother Killer Mike, and I'm probably saying it out of order, but he talks about it all the time: organize and plot, plan, strategize, mobilize, continue to lift our voices, continue to support independent media, because these are the stories that you're not going to hear in mainstream media. Bottom line, they're not going to challenge their leaders, if you will. So we just have to continue. For me personally, I own a consultant firm, a communications firm. So me personally, I try to do my part as one person. I train dozens of candidates every month with giving them the tools that they need for earned media, for organizing. I try to do my part. My motto, again, is push the line. I have a logo, and under the PUSH, there's one person that's pushing each letter, and they're moving forward. They're not looking at the person to the side or to the left. They're moving forward. And then there's a kid on the side that's watching them do what they do. So for me personally, I just believe in pushing the line in any way that I can, from the moment I get up to the moment I lay down. I can't change one thing by myself, but I encourage those to do what you can. If that's on Twitter, then do what you can. If that's on Instagram, do what you can. If it's a blog, if it's a radio show, if it's whatever, do what you can. I did all of this by myself, hustle and muscle. Nobody put me in the game. Nobody said, "Oh, hey, come on, Tez, we want to see, we want to see what talent you have." I did it starting out on Blog Talk Radio, on AM stations, just continuing to lift my voice. I did not come from a family of politicians. I did not come from a family of money. I just simply did what I felt was what is right. And I just believe that if people continue to do that and not be swayed by any particular leader, and get up every day saying, it's not a matter of being cynical. It's a matter of saying, I am serious about pushing change. And so if we do that, there's that, I don't know if you ever saw that cartoon by Dr. Seuss. It's called The Who. And I love that movie because
Horny Ears of Who. There you go.
Yes, and it was all of the people that were so little that couldn't be heard. But the more they came together, the louder they got. Eventually, they were heard. And I just believe in that. It's just my fundamental belief. Some days I wake up and say, to hell with this. It's all a waste of time. But there's always something in me that says, once it's all said and done, I know I will be held account for my own, what I did, not what somebody else did or what they could have done, but what I have done. And so there is voter fatigue. People are over it, whether that's Black voters, Hispanic voters, whatever, white vote, you name it, progressives, Democrat, whatever, however you want to box, you want to put it into. People are over it. But that to me is the greatest time to produce the most amount of change. So I say run for whatever you can. Dog catcher, precinct chair, it doesn't matter. Run for mayor, even if you think you don't have a chance in hell. Get involved on the local and the state level. That's where you see the most change. I think the attention really needs to be focused on that. The attention certainly needs to be focused on attorney generals. There's 30 seats that are coming up next year that people are not talking about at all. And then the federal level, hey, it is what it is. But if you're going to turn off the federal side and say, I'm over it, at the very least, pay attention to what's going on, at your local level, because it's the smallest branch. It's usually nonpartisan. It's usually a very small branch of 6 or 10 people that sit on your commissioner board, in addition to the mayor. And that's where I've seen the most change with my candidates that I work with. And I think people shouldn't gloss over that and really, try to take over those seats as much as they can.
Thank you so much, Tezlyn, for being on our show. I think as a final question, there's a couple things I do want to bring up. Number one, a good friend of the show, Roger Meadows, he talks about supporting worker co-ops, ballot initiatives. He's doing fantastic work in New York State, especially for the campaign for New York healthcare and worker co-ops for drive shares. He went on to state this to me, and you can respond to it too. But it's a little bit long statement, but I want to give respect to my good friend Roger Meadows. I know you and others support third parties, Kit. However, taking Professor Richard Wolff's template that we need to go beyond just regulating an antitrust of capitalism and recognition of taking a look at the whole system and realizing that it's a system that is sick, and we need a new system fashioned around worker co-ops, not corporate, public banks instead of Wall Street, because all we are doing is putting out fires. I take his template and apply it to it as parties, assuming that parties will save us is a sickness in the system. I don't just say that because I prefer ballot initiatives, but personally, I don't believe in political parties. I can give you 32 reasons why they and corporations need to be abolished and made unconstitutional. Just by their design, they are one, divisive from the start. They are self-interested. They think about that fact. I can't do anything for you until we get our party in order is sick. 3, it dumbs down the electorate and makes us lazy on the issues. Why find out about the issues when it's easier to vote on brand? No matter how they start out, eventually the self-interest will take over. Remember, the GOP's only mission was to abolish slavery, started by a bunch of slave abolitionists at the time when that was unthinkable. The U.S. economy was centered around it. Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, ushered in the progressive era with environmental conservatism and trust busting. Now look at them. To me, getting rid of parties is like cutting out the middleman. Until then, black people would have better leverage, not only with Democrats, but with the GOP if we all registered independent. Democrats would panic, and GOP would actually think that they would have a chance with the fly girl to dance. I think black people under 41, as Tez says, under 46, are bum rushing the offices to become regular indies. Tez, yes, the rotating villain you speak of. They all get together and figure out whose election is furthest in the future and roll with them. Tez, do you live in a state that allows for ballot initiatives? Because I tell Kit, whatever we can't get done federally, then let's get it done at the state level through either ballot initiatives or state government. We live in like a state of New York or Texas that doesn't allow for ballot initiatives. What about creating some type of multi-state grassroots network to help finance good ballot initiatives, like in Maine, Medicare for All against bad ones? Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I've always pushed ballot initiatives. You know, what I was saying a moment ago. First of all, I've always been independent, an independent voter. Well, I won't say always. I actually left the Democrat Party in 2012 when they got slaughtered in 2010. I was just over it in 2012. At that particular time, I was in Florida. And there was a conversation at that time with the newspaper that we had there in Orlando that talked about. The Florida Courier actually is a black newspaper, and they really wanted to push an independent initiative, at least among black voters. But when they thought about how difficult it would be to get everybody to register independent and then come back, because Florida is a state where you have to be a Democrat or Republican to vote in the primary. So when they thought about, hey, let's do this, and it was a real initiative that we were a part of, but when they thought about how hard it is to get people to register at all, and because of all of the challenges in Florida, with felons and all of that, because this was at a time where felons could not vote, and then to get them to register as an independent, well, first register at all, and then go from being a Democrat to independent. When they thought about how difficult it would be to get them to go back to being a Democrat, just to get the right type of Democrat, because until this changes, it's not going to change overnight. So how do we manage both sides? How do we get the best candidate we can put forward on the Democrat side while some folks are still being an independent? So using Florida as an example, when they thought about, hey, we're going to end up getting a crappy Democratic candidate, like using a Joe Biden, for example, if we don't have the right folks voting for the right candidates in the Democrat Party, the initiative stopped. However, when you compare that to Texas, where you do not register as a Democrat or a Republican, and it may not have the opportunities that he mentioned on the issue side, but in Texas, you don't have to decide if you're a Democrat or Republican until you actually go vote at the polls that day. So those are states where initiatives can be push to say, hey, we want an independent initiative. Everything doesn't have to happen the same way everywhere all over the United States in order to make an impact. In fact, it should not. There should be some mud in the water, a little bit of difference between the state that you live in. But should there be a push for independent voters? Absolutely. But what does that mean? If it means putting in a crappy candidate, because for the most part, I would assume that most progressives lean left. So if you, and this is not a less of the two evil, answer, but if you have a choice between a crappy candidate Democrat in a Democratic primary, we want to have the voices for those that represent, closest to our interests. And so if those voters are pushed out of the game because they were registered as an independent and not in the primary, and then they still have to deal with voter restriction laws and all the things that we're fighting for now, like being able to just get to the polls in the first place, now we're going to end up with more crappy candidates as Democrat primaries. So the short answer is yes, there should be an independent voter initiative. It should be strategically on states. I also tell people this, kid, even with polls, like sign up to be a part of polls. A lot of how Democrats or even Republicans, how they court voters, they do it based upon polls. And I tell people nobody's going to come in your house and say, hey, you said that you would vote for a Republican or a Democrat or an independent on a poll. But what they do with those polls is, kid, they take that information, and I'm saying this by working on campaigns, they take that information and say, you know what, we're in trouble in this area. We need to put more money into this area. We need to put more get out the vote initiative in this area. We need to make more promises in this area. We need to support other candidates in this area. And a lot of that data is based on polls. So I tell people at the very least, throw some salt in the game with the polls. Don't always answer the poll according to maybe necessarily how you really feel. It's not like, somebody's going to come say, hey, you type whatever. When you go into the booth, that's when you get an opportunity to say how you really feel. So there's a lot of strategy that could be done on how to basically have fear as a motivation. Independent is one, but if there's not going to be a snap of my fingers and say, everybody be independent overnight. That's not going to happen. So we have to do, what do we do in the meantime while we're trying to shake up the system and get them to act right, like my grandmother would call it. And then at the same time, position our candidates in better positions. And that's where the local initiatives do matter. Ballot initiatives, and also your city commissioners and your city council. I'll give this one example and I'll shut up. I've lived in Texas for
please keep on sharing. No need to shut up. No need about it. Please share.
I lived in Texas for a long time. And I'm going to say this about Medicare for All. I lived in Texas in both Houston and Dallas. And when folks, I'm not saying don't push Medicare for All on the federal level, but I'm going to give an example of how a lot of localized initiatives are looked over. In Harris County has a great county program. LA County has a great county program. It's not the best of the best, but when I broke my leg in Houston, Texas, under that program, under that Harris County program, you know how much it cost me to get my 6 screws in my ankle fixed? $50. At the private hospital, it was $27,000 for a one-night stay. But because at the time my income was able to qualify for it, Harris County Health, I was able to get a surgery for $50. That is the type of Medicare for All that we're pushing for on the federal level. And I believe and I know that progressives and progressive candidates have not talked enough about how those policies actually work. When you look at Harris County, which has a Democrat mayor, Sylvester Turner, and being able to show that type of healthcare that actually worked in a community to get people the necessary healthcare. Fort Bend, which is another county outside of Houston, they don't cover surgeries at all. So one county has a totally different requirement than Harris County, because Harris County is a poor county, by the way, majority Black, by the way, 4th largest city in the country, right under LA. And Fort Bend, which is just right up the street, won't even cover a surgery at all. So if we start using these examples, that's the type of issues that I'm talking about that you can change at the local and the state level. And you can still push for Medicare for All at the same time. We have got to start understanding that 2 things can be done at the same time. Mayor Sylvester Turner, which is a Democrat, and some would say a moderate Democrat. But guess what he did? He still banned chokeholds at the local level. He still started an online database through the city of Houston to be able to report bad cops. He still did some type of investment. He didn't call it defund the police, but he certainly reallocated funds to go towards mental health awareness and violence interruptions. He did that at the local level. So there is change that can happen at the local level, because when you are engaging with your mayor that you see at the store, that you see at church, when you only have to convince 10 or 12 folks who sit on the county board, you can make a difference. People have got to start looking at 2 things, doing 2 things at one time. Look at Colorado. They stopped qualified immunity in the state of Colorado. How did that happen? One of the most progressive police reform policies in the country is in Colorado and in the county of LA County. Nobody talks about it because we get so caught up on the federal level, and then people get depressed and say nothing's changing, nothing's happening. That's just simply not true. We're just not paying attention to how do we get behind these local candidates. And if you get behind the local candidates, the stronger they get as a mayor, the better they can be positioned to win Congress, the better they can be positioned to run for president, and the better they can be positioned to win. It is a step-by-step thing, not all the way up here, but all the way from the ground, all the way up. And so that's what I encourage people to do. Look at it with Cori Bush. It showed how the local level can take someone up to the national level. You just have to have more of that.
Well, thank you. Again, it's a huge shout out to Roger Meadows, and I think he appreciates that response as well. I think as a final question for our viewers and subscribers, where can they find you online and social media? And is there any kind of event you want to plug or support while we still have you on, just so that people know where to find you and support the work that you're doing?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Tezlyn Figaro. There's only one, so it's not hard to find. I think Twitter is where we need the most engagement. I'm on Instagram, but I always encourage people, and progressives know this better than anybody, that Twitter is the best place that we can engage because the media pays attention to Twitter. You know, I have way more followers on Instagram than I do Twitter, but I tell people go to Twitter because the conversations, me working in communications with politicians, I can tell you for certain that the conversations that trend, that we look and see what folks are saying from Twitter, not from Instagram, Facebook. You know, we pay attention to those conversations, but they're not as important as Twitter. So I really need more folks in the Twitter space so that we're engaging, especially when I go on Fox News next year, because most of the people that follow me from Twitter, the reason why my follower doesn't reflect the amount of homes that I'm in, BNC, I'm in 55 million homes every day, and Fox News, whether people like it or not, they have more viewers than MSNBC and CNN. But the problem is when I go on Fox, those viewers don't want to follow me. They may listen to me, but they don't follow me. So in order to keep bumping up the conversations, the commentary that you graciously share, thank you again for that. We need to be in the Twitter space so that can get shared over and over. So you can know, hey, it's people holding it down for you in places that other people don't want to go. So I would encourage people to follow me on Twitter. Certainly subscribe to my podcast. That always helps. Every week I drop a new show. It's called Straight Shot No Chaser with Tezlyn Figaro.
All right. Thank you so much, Tezlyn Figaro. One of the few people out there speaking truth to power. It was real great to have you on our show. We do hope for a follow-up because let's face it, the 2022 midterm election cycle will be very interesting to cover to see how it will all play out. There's going to be a lot of seats that are up for election, both at the Senate level, at the House level, and also at the state level as well. So let's see how that all works out. Tezlyn Figaro, thank you so much for joining Hard Lens Media. Thank you again for being on our show.
I just want to say I can't thank you enough. On TV, I only get 1 minute and 20 seconds at best, sometimes 3 minutes. So it's always good to have these long, extended conversations so people can know what's behind my words. So thank you so much again.